Welcome to Between Two Clinicians, the podcast that gives you a backstage pass to the mind of two therapists. I'm Talia.
And I'm Adam.
Let's get into it.
So, Talia, what the heck are we doing here?
I ask myself that on a daily basis when I wake up in the morning.
You just check your simple practice and you're like,
Yes.
oh boy, okay.
Also, very cute name, but not accurate. It's not simple.
There's nothing simple about having your own practice.
Their software is good, though. I will say that.
Yes, I'll go on that one.
Yes. So we are here because you and I get along well, and we have very interesting and unique perspectives, I would say, on a majority of topics that most people want to learn more about. And we aim to also reduce that stigma and that barrier that some people still hold around what therapists are like and what they are and aren't allowed to be. And you and I are very raw. We're very real.
Yep.
That unapologetic, that dark humor, that depth. And if we need to include some research, we can do that too. But it's you have access to our minds and what we think
Yeah.
and what our opinions are on certain topics, both professionally and if we want to make it personal, we can share that too. So you guys get to know who we are behind the scenes.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't guarantee that you're always going to love what we're talking about, but we can promise you're probably going to laugh during the episode.
You will absolutely laugh. You may cry, and you will probably be triggered. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole idea when you come and you talk to me about what would it be like to get on and do a podcast together, it was the whole idea of, I don't want to do the same show that you can find on some other podcast. I want to do something that really works at the center of who we are. And you and I both have that ability of just we can put the therapist cap on, we can be the clinician, and then we can pull it off. We can have great fun and we can go back and forth. And so being able to actually break down how a lot of that unconscious work is us.
Yes.
And the fun that we have. And sometimes it's great to know why we do that thing that we do.
Yes. Getting to the why. That is what I strive for, probably in my own life a lot. And with all of my clients, how can I stop? I'm like, you're asking the wrong questions. Why are you doing this? Why do you have the desire to do that? Where is that drive coming from? I think learning to ask those questions first is incredible. And I'm having a deja vu moment right now. Learning to ask those questions first is incredibly helpful because it gets you to the source. And once you start healing that and understanding that, you actually may not need as many of the coping skills that you think, or you may be less stressed, less anxious, more respectful, feeling more respect from your partner, right? We're going to talk about all of those topics on this podcast. And again, you might be triggered. It's not like we're saying it to be insensitive. There are going to be things that you don't even know that you have activations around that we're going to push on. So if you're not ready to face some of your internal stuff, I don't recommend listening to this podcast.
Well, because in all honesty, one of my goals for every person after one of our episodes is that they walk away with questions, not what the hell did I just listen to? But more importantly, well, wait a second, I haven't really asked that about myself before. And have I taken on a role in someone else's play? And that's my life. I'm playing this person I don't want to be. We're going to ask those questions of you, and you might feel uncomfortable in that. And that's where the therapist part of me is perfect. I want to know why you feel uncomfortable about that. But if you're tuning in because you think that this is going to be therapy, we're not going to tell you what to do.
No.
We're not going to outline do this in DBT or CBT. And the buzzwords is probably not what you're going to see from a therapeutic side. We're going to be more talking about how do I navigate life on realistic life terms?
Yeah, absolutely. And what is it like for us humans, mere mortals who have gone through a lot of training and a lot of hours? My brain is remarkably different than many years ago before I ever did any of this. I now operate this way in the world, and I notice how removed that might be from the way that people are first learning about it. Because when I sit with my clients or when I talk to other people, they're like, oh my gosh, I've never thought of it that way. Oh my gosh, how do you think of things that way? How do you word things that way? That's more the inside scoop and the backstage pass. It's how we conceptualize and how we talk about these topics that we see. It's not designed to be therapeutic advice. This may or may not be what our own clients hear with us in session. I'm really authentic. I think I'm the same person in and out of the room.
Yeah.
Obviously, I would take up more space out of the room because it's my life, not a session of a
Yes.
client. But that's pretty much how I am. I talk with my hands. I use humor. I laugh. I joke. Like, I'm real. I'm honest. And I do have opinions. And I think being able to share them with other people. And if you are listening to this and you sometimes struggle with, like, well, I don't agree with that, flex your mind a little bit. It's okay to hear an opinion that you don't like and sit long enough with the person to understand what it means for them, and then make a decision in a respectful way. Like, that's kind of my goal, is even if you hear something that you don't like, if you're a listener of this or a watcher of this, that it's not designed to intentionally make you upset.
Yeah.
How would I possibly know that that's going to trigger you? I just happen to know people that get triggered easily. So I can assume some of the things I will talk about may be activating to you. But past that, that's up to you to work through.
Exactly. Like, a lot of the process of when we're going to be utilizing inclusion in this podcast is going to be the fact that we won't exclude different thought processes. Because
Exactly.
I don't think actually creating blind spots within a person or the way that we conceptualize other people makes it helpful in how we navigate
Right.
other people.
Yeah.
And that's where this podcast is sort of going to rest itself, is being able to have the uncomfortable conversations done with dignity and integrity. You're not going to hear us willfully like
Bashing.
dismissing or bashing other people. We're going to talk about, like, I can't wait for, like, the Thanksgiving episode. How do you navigate your racist uncle at the Thanksgiving table? I can't wait. Like,
being the racist uncle at the table.
yeah. Dude, if he's listening and I can't
everybody can benefit from this podcast, right? So that's kind of the dynamic, kind of the banter that you'll hear. We both love humor, we both love insight, and I think we give good interview. So that's why we created this podcast. And I think for those of you who don't know us, maybe we can share a little bit more about who we are aside from our names and that we're therapists. I think that might help our audience to know and get to know us a little bit more. Do you want to go
So you want
first?
me to go first? Okay. I felt that one was getting lined up.
Did you read between the lines?
Yeah, I was like, oh shit, she took my talking point. She's gonna make me go first. I always love that in class when you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, you go ahead. No worries. Like, okay, I'll sit back and think about it.
Yeah.
So my name is Adam Luke. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm licensed in California, Idaho, and Tennessee. I currently reside in Middle Tennessee, a little place called Columbia, Tennessee. And my whole therapy process, like how I got here, it's kind of funny. You were sort of touching on this, like, man, if I could have gone back in time and talked to myself, like, I feel like there would be me now as a therapist catching me as a teenager going into a house party and be like, you are going to spend $5,000 in therapy if you walk in there.
Yep.
Like, there's just all sorts of, you're like, oh no, this is going to take up 8 months of really intense work. You should probably not date that person. So it's crazy because you do have this other awareness. Now, I'm not perfect. I still have my issues. I still have my own work to do. My wife will certainly tell you I'm not perfect, and that's perfectly fine with me.
Yes.
But as a therapist, I have really built my practice and who I am as a person off of being that blue collar therapist. I really had that awareness when I was actually a mechanic for 15 years. Like, being a mechanic was my first career. And I realized that these men that I came to really trust and who were mentoring, pouring into me, they were dynamic individuals, loved them to death, but they had terrible relationships with their families, and their bodies were breaking down at early ages. So, they're in their 40s or 50s, and the career just doesn't have a very long sustainability when you're working, whether it's in the sun or in the cold. Like, it's just hard on your body. And so I started to realize, like, maybe there's something else. Like, I love fixing cars. What would it be like to work with people? What would it be like to see what that would be like to encourage people to change? It's a lot easier with a car because you give the car the part and they're good. But people, it's a little longer process. But I love the work I do. And I really, when I was searching for my own therapist, and I had been in therapy before I even got into this field of like taking psych classes and gonna go get my master's, and I really struggled to find someone that I could identify with.
Yeah.
And so really me becoming a therapist was, I want to do therapy where men and people like me with the same like life experiences can have a place where they can feel safe, secure, and encouraged to open up. And so that's where I am. My practice's name is Wild Ethos Counseling. You can find me at www Wild Ethos Counseling, or you can find me on Instagram as Wild Ethos Counseling, and Facebook as well. But those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me. And that's a little bit of like what I do.
I love that. And I'm glad that we are connected. I think it was many years ago that we first met. And I've been on your podcast and you've been on my other one as well. And I so appreciate your perspective. And I will honestly say, looking back at my own past too, it sounds like we're very similar in that. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Talia Bombola. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. My practice is in California, in Southern California, and I mostly see clients who need help with confidence and assertiveness skills. So if you are struggling with low self-worth, low self-esteem, anything that would relate to how you view yourself and how you perceive other people viewing you or perceiving you, if that's in a negative light, or if it's in an overtly, I'm deriving self-worth through productivity, I need to be a good person, my value in my childhood was based on how good I was. I help you break that down a lot. And especially for my clients who struggle with being passive aggressive, I take you to being assertive, or aggressive aggressive. I take you to being assertive, like that nice middle ground. And that's something that I learned through my own life history. I
Mm,
had a pretty rough adolescence, I would say, by choice and by lack of choice. So some things happened to me, some things I chose, and I didn't cope very well with that. Though I was in therapy, I started therapy in middle school. I didn't cope with it well, and I wish I had
mm,
like a Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder. And I'm sure I did, honestly. Like, my therapist had mentioned those things, and she's my guru. I love her very much, and I still wasn't able to hear it at the time.
yeah.
So it's like a lot of what we'll talk about on this podcast is, I think, advice or feedback
Mm,
or opinions I wish I had growing up. I wish I
yeah.
had learned these things and been able to talk about these things growing up instead of only finding it out now.
Yep.
And I had to learn a lot. As the bridesmaid's quote, when she like fell off the cruise ship, she's like, I broke a lot of shit on the way down. Like, I have seen her and done it all myself. Nothing you say will shock me. Like, I
Yep.
I have a level of depth that's like the bottom of the ocean. I prefer it there. I like a lot of insight. I do more of the analytic type work. That's my
Mm,
preference. And that's because I got to know myself that deeply, and to be known at that level was eye-opening, and to know myself at that level
mm,
was eye-opening. And even if people I meet have like a tenth of that, that's like very cool to me for them to have that. So this is definitely a passion project that supports my like whole ethos of my
mhm,
practice, which is depth-based work, depth-based knowledge of yourself, that you, once you know something about yourself and you own it, another person can't use it against you. And I strive for all of my clients to meet all their shadow parts, to meet their dark parts, to integrate them and feel quality, like good about themselves. And then when other people interact with them, they're not as worried. They are more confident and assertive, because if somebody comes up to you like, oh, you're this, oh, you're that, and but not in a super egotistical way, right? In a very calm,
yeah.
assertive, like, I know my shit. I know who I am. If you don't like me, that's fine. You don't need to be in my life. So taking
What
more of that.
blows me away so much with you talking about that is like you're basically reinforcing you walk alongside your clients and getting them to give themselves permission
Yes.
to be that person. Like the
Yeah.
confidence wasn't just something they had to go like snatch. This isn't a
No.
side quest. It
No.
was always within them.
Yes. Yes.
But I mean, it just resonates with me. Like when I was younger, and just I was always that chubby dude, and so like I was always friends with the good looking guys, but I was like eternally friend zoned. And I love that it helped me be able to like work on my craft as a therapist in some ways,
True.
because I knew how to give people space. But at the same time, it I was waiting for a search and rescue party. Like I was waiting for someone to show up in the door one day and be like, "Hey, we're going to take you to higher places. And then what you
Mhm.
find out is no one's stepping through the gap. You have to look at yourself through the mirror.
It's you.
When am I going to give myself permission to
Right.
exist or to
Right.
be something different?
And be more authentic. I think there's a
Mm,
gap that I either there's a chapter of everyone's life where they think they know who they are and they don't. Adolescence, right? You like are convinced that you're all these amazing things. You know it all, can do it all, be it all,
mm,
whatever level. There's some truth to that. I think there
yeah.
is some truth to you know yourself better than other people might know you. And once the ego
Mm,
could come down, you may be able to integrate other people's perspectives of you that there's no way you could see. Like there's no
yeah.
way you can see yourself from that lens. And it's helpful to integrate that feedback. So being able to transcend your own ego almost, or to know that you've had that confidence and
Mm,
assertiveness, in my case, inside the whole time through unfortunate events that happened, it was taken away or it was jeopardized.
yeah.
I had to get it back and then it was taken away. Like I fought for it. I had it naturally.
Mhm,
I had it taken away. I fought for it many times and it's like not going anywhere. Like it's very well
mm,
integrated and it's not a defensive self-protection. It's a true knowing this is who I am and
yeah.
who I know that people are capable of becoming are those traits specifically.
Mm,
And I've seen clients go from passive aggressive, people pleasing, miserable job, miserable relationship, etc., to just bought a new house with my new fiance. I love my job now. I have a raise. I can set boundaries. Like you have all of this inside of you. You may not have had somebody come in and tell you, right,
mhm,
what you're capable of. And even if you don't believe it, I'll hold it on your behalf until you do. And I will get
yeah.
in your mind and I will love you in ways, not inappropriately, that you have never been loved before. And you will look at yourself in the mirror and be like, wait, I am special. Like that's
Mhm,
my goal is for clients to do that and not be egotistical or more of like a narcissistic trait. It's like this is out of self-love and self-preservation that I met my authentic self and now I feel comfortable enough with other people doing the same. I want to be met at
yeah.
that.
Now, I know something that you and I had talked about is wanting to have a podcast that sure we navigated those buzzwords, but we didn't
Yes.
hang the whole podcast
Yeah.
on buzzwords.
Right.
So, like, when you say authentic, I can't
Mhm.
help but sit back and go, okay, I know what our definition is of it, but like, what do you think authenticity on this podcast looks like for like our listener? How are they gonna, how's it gonna be different?
Than others, than other definitions. I think authenticity on this podcast is that raw, real, behind the scenes. You are with us in live time. These episodes are not scripted, though we
Mhm.
might get content ideas or topic ideas from Q&As that we do or
Yeah.
like themes of the week, as we called it before we started recording from our own client sessions. Like, what are people journeying through? The authentic approach is my genuine opinion, which opinions are based on facts and trusted
Mm,
sources in your own life experience. And how congruent is that with like my authentic self? And they're my beliefs, they're your beliefs.
yeah.
Some of the things will be based on research. Some of it will be based on more on opinion and kind of belief systems. That's the authentic part of it, is that well-rounded
Mm,
approach. This is real. This is raw. This is
yeah.
what we're coming to you with. And if you don't like it, scroll past or fast forward. And if you do like it, dive in and be ready to be uncomfortable and ask yourself those questions to find your authentic self. Typically, we're not triggered by something unless we do it ourselves or we do it to other people and we don't want to be found out about it. Or
True.
we're not able to integrate new information because we get so defensive. So if you are triggered, and I say this with love, good, this is good feedback for you to take to your own
Mhm.
therapist, your own journal. Why was this topic so activating? Oh,
Yeah.
I've never actually heard it spoken about in that way. That's part of the authenticity. I'm not going to sugarcoat. I'll be kind, but I'm not going to sugarcoat what I think
Yes.
people are capable of deep down. I don't do the gentle hand holding. I don't think it helps people grow.
I'll never weaponize your emotions, but
No.
I am going to encourage them to be present. I
Yes.
always laugh
Correct.
when I work
Yes.
with clients and they're like, "Oh, I can feel myself getting emotional. I hate being emotional." Like,
Yep.
then I am a real shitty therapist if I'm like, "Well, tuck those bad boys down.
Yeah.
God, this is
Yeah.
not the space to get emotional." Well, where is? If you can't do it with a therapist, where can you be? The reason why I wanted to ask that question about authenticity is because I feel like so so many times we take these words that were based in healing,
Yeah.
based in like a well-rounded, healthy approach to life, and then they get weaponized. I think the most common way of seeing like, oh, be your authentic self is like some poolside Palm Springs photo on Instagram. And a lot of times then we're like, oh, our most authentic self is like traveling then. Our most authentic self is like us buying whatever we want. Actually, and I've been trying to find a way to verbalize this, and we'll just roll with it now,
Yeah.
but authenticity and living your most authentic life is literally having walk away moments in your life. Authenticity is when no matter what someone brings up to me, I know that I will exist past that moment. No, I used a phrase that everyone's probably like walk away moment. You've probably heard it more as like the fuck you money. Fuck you
Yes.
money is that moment where it's like, well, I don't care what anyone else says because I got my money and I can go. I got my
Mhm.
bag, I'm on my way.
Mhm.
Well, what we really need to talk about is like there's a healthy side of that and there's a toxic side of that. So
Sure.
when we're talking about the authentic self, when we're talking about having authenticity in your life, and what we mean in this podcast is being able to be so comfortable with yourself that you live your life uninhibited by miserable people,
Yeah. That's a
because
good way to put it.
that is a situation that we're always dealing with. Doesn't matter if I'm a successful therapist, I'm an average day Joe, I'm someone who's working on a car. We are navigating that constantly because it seems like what we're doing is we're comparing whether or not our happiness is matching up with someone else's level of happiness.
Mhm.
And that's the first like step in failing altogether. What
Yes.
Talia likes to do for self-care is going to be different than what I like to do for self-care, and that's okay.
And knowing that there are allowed to be differences without it being a negative is huge as well. So you can do something differently than a person, or they can do something differently from you. And if you have very strong negative associations, just don't associate with that person, or take yourself to task and look, why is that so activating? Why is that so
Mm,
triggering? Why is that so challenging? Oh, I actually don't even have a self-care plan in place. That's why I don't like hearing about when other people are able to go get massages, right? Or I'm coming from a scarcity mindset. That's an abundance
mm,
mindset. That like that's a lot of what I think the topics will be
yep.
foundationally based on in this podcast as we learn and grow and explore, being able to talk about topics in a very raw perspective that I think
Yep.
our field typically is like, well, you must be the buttoned up and this and that. And there's a lot of projections and a lot of assumptions made about therapists that are in some positive ways accurate, right? Like if we talk to people like, oh, they were so nice. They were like, those are the good associations.
Hmm.
And then there's some that are completely erroneous and they're not accurate. And we don't wear cardigans all the time and we don't have no feelings and we don't have none of our own stuff. Like, why do you think we're able to sit in the topics we're able to sit
Mm,
in, right? We didn't have no life beforehand. And then we're like, I will go to clinical therapy school. I will become a therapist. I have a lot of life experience and you do too, right? And we've
yep.
done a lot of shit maybe that we wouldn't do again. I'm not going to use the shame word should, but we've learned a lot of what to do and not do through the life that we've lived. And so that's also
Mm,
part of the authentic part of this perspective is like, this is our real human view. And
yep.
anyways, that way of thinking about the world and being analytical, et cetera, is like part of my
Mm,
personality type too. That's part of the authenticity is I'm a therapist and I'm so many other things like
yep.
you are as well. This is how we think about these topics and move through the world.
Man, I'm ready to go.
Me too. It's exciting. So I think to let our listeners and viewers know, we'll be meeting every other week, typically.
Yes.
We'll try and get in at least definitely one episode, if not two, depending on the topic. But you and I
Hmm.
are very good with banter. So I imagine it'll be about once every other week. And if you have specific topics that you like, let us know. Like message us on Instagram.
Please.
Message. I'm at Talia Bombola and Adam.
I'm at Wild Ethos Counseling.
Yes. So we'll add those in the show notes in the description. Like, let us know what you want to hear. Otherwise, I love the sound of my own voice enough. I have 3 podcasts now at this point. I'll talk about anything. So,
Yep.
though I don't need the feedback and questions of the framework, I'm happy to answer the questions you have because, like we've talked about before, accessibility is a huge part of this. Not everybody has
Mm,
access to this type of thinking. I'm not going to say to
yeah.
therapy. That's a whole separate social issue. Not everybody has access to be able to think in these frameworks, and podcast can serve as a template for, oh, I want to start thinking about it the way that they thought about it. So it can help from that
Yeah.
angle too.
And I mean, when you reach out to us, don't feel like, oh, well, my question has to be connected to the last episode.
Not at
Like,
all.
I don't care if you're like sitting there in the middle of the night, can't go to sleep, and this thing's rattling around in your head. I want that DM at 2 a.m. in the
Mhm.
morning. And do you know that you'll get a response? We're not going to ghost you in it, but it does help us because we have plenty of content we can find in our own lives.
Yeah.
I mean, just the blessing of how many people we get to sit down with each week. We can pull these themes out ourselves. But it's great if you have something off the top of your head of like, I want to know, like, what the hell is self-care?
Mhm.
Or, I'm in therapy and I'm struggling with blank, like
Yes.
whatever that might be. Like, how do I make these changes? I can feel these sides of me that doesn't want to pivot. Okay, let's talk about this. Let's break it
Mhm.
down. What does that look like in the real world? Because I know that, and I don't want to speak for you, Talia, but I know for myself, I've done a lot of work on myself as a client. And
Oh yeah.
so having sat on that side of the chair, there there is like a little bit of timidness sometimes when you're sitting there with a therapist and they're like, okay, well, let's start with self-care, or let's start with a vision board, or let's do all these things. And it's like, well, shit, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like in real life? And so if you feel like you're having a nervous side of yourself of like, I don't want to ask a stupid question to my therapist, ask a stupid question to two therapists. That would be great.
Double down, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. I think
No.
honestly there are ways to word it that are more effective, and a question has to have a question mark at the end. I will say that.
Mhm.
I get a lot of people in my Q&A boxes on Instagram and they just say a statement. I'm like, that's not a question. That's just you
Yeah.
get, which is not a bad thing, but I can't do
I do love that.
because you're not giving me something to answer. And we're only human. We do this to the best of our ability. Let us know what you want. And if you do message, at least for me, with the way my page works, I'm not going to answer you via DM. But if you say, hey, I want this on the podcast, right? Be nice about it. Like, I would please like this answered in the podcast episode. I'm happy to make note of that or pop it into Q&A. And the ones I do regularly, there's times where I'm like, oh, this is an episode worthy question. Like, it's long enough to
Mhm.
really dive in. We will use that as material. We want
Yeah.
this to be real and answer the questions that you might have about, I don't know, dating, relationships, family, therapy, why you are the way you are. Why is your family the way that they are? Why won't people change? Why do men do this? Why do women do this?
Yeah.
What's it like to be fill in the blank? So any of those questions that you have to explore, we will do our best
Yep.
to answer those.
Unrestricted access.
Unrestricted access, which usually comes at a pretty penny. So
Yep.
take advantage of this and our two minds in the same room at once. Well,
That's a great way to think about it. Like both of us on our time, like if you were to hire both of us for the hour, that's a car payment.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. And that's I think something to talk about too. It's a big investment, and it's not like, oh, I make that investment in my therapist,
mm,
my mentor, so I think I should charge. Like, that's based on decades, like years, et cetera, of life experience, clinical experience, trainings, et cetera. Like, you're paying for the expertise and
yeah,
almost short circuiting of not having to go through a lot of that yourself when you make that investment of time and money into
absolutely.
a clinician who you feel like is a good fit, who can help you get to where you want to be. That's the point of mentorship, is has
Hmm.
this person in some way been there before, or have they already hacked the system to find what I want? And can I
Yeah.
pay for their time or their resources to learn from them? The best investment you can ever make
Mm,
yourself.
yeah. I mean, I almost feel like that's an episode we have to cover is like the
Abundance
price
mindset.
objection.
Yeah, and price
Like,
objection. Absolutely.
is the price objection really I can't afford it, or I could never conceptualize putting that amount of money into investing myself? Like if you have a new iPhone, if you've got a new iPad, if you've got every app known to God on
Yep.
your Apple
You go to
TV,
dinner every
like
week, you're partying, you're whatever. No judgment,
yeah,
but that's money going out that could be going
yeah,
into.
exactly. I mean, you can go to a $300 dinner and what you get from there lasts 8 hours in your life.
Yeah,
Or you can go to therapy and that might stick around for the rest of your life. Which one is it?
I would say the latter.
There you go.
Yeah. So we hope you stay tuned. If you like this episode, please let us know by rating it, like, comment, subscribe, get in contact with us in some way. And I would say stay tuned for more.
We'll see you guys in a few.